When learning to bake, it is important to understand that there is a big difference between baking soda and baking powder. Baking soda and baking powder are key ingredients in many recipes, but they play different roles in the baking process. What is soda? Baking soda is only one ingredient, better known as sodium bicarbonate, is commonly used in baking. It's a leavening agent, which means it allows for doughs and batters to rise. The reaction of this rising occurs when the baking soda is mixed with an acidic ingredient and moisture. The combination of these ingredients in heat produces bubbles from carbon dioxide, which causes the rising to ensue. If a recipe calls for baking soda, it is important that you don't mistakenly omit it from the recipe, because leaving baking soda out of it will cause your baked goods to fall flat. In addition, many desserts call for both baking soda and baking powder. This will help in achieving the right consistency. Most desserts that call for baking soda often need an acidic counterpart. These are lemon juice, brown sugar, molasses, or yogurt. What is baking powder? Baking powder contains baking soda, as well as a cream of tartar, and a drying agent such as starch. In fact, most baking powders include two acids. Monocalcium phosphate is one of the acids found in baking powder. It helps in preventing any form of reaction until it is mixed into a wet batter. Once it comes in contact with the wet batter, it begins a chemical leavening. To further the chemical leavening, baking powder also contains a second acid known as sodium acid pyrophosphate, sodium aluminum phosphate. The unique thing about these acids is that they don't mix with the baking soda until they are either hot or wet. This means that both sodium acid pyrophosphate and sodium aluminum phosphate won't interact with baking powder until it is in the oven. This process is what is often referred to as double-acting baking powder, and is the most common form of baking powder. The leavening occurs when it gets wet, and then again when it gets hot, unlike baking soda. Most times, when a recipe calls for baking powder, it always refers to the double-acting type. Substituting baking powder. If you are in the middle of making a recipe and just realized that you don't have baking powder, there is certainly no need to panic. This is because you can get 1 teaspoon of baking powder by combining a half a teaspoon of baking soda and a quarter teaspoon of tartar cream. If you don't have tartar cream, you can also use lemon juice or white vinegar. The truth is, tartar cream and baking soda is your best bet to replace baking powder, because lemon juice and white vinegar might slightly alter the taste of the recipe. Using buttermilk as a substitute. You may also use half a cup of buttermilk and 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. If you follow this method, reduce all other liquids in the recipe by half a cup. Understanding the difference between baking soda and baking powder. Even if you bake regularly, it can be confusing to understand the difference between baking soda and baking powder. It can also get difficult to understand why some recipes only call for baking soda or baking powder, or for both of them. When the acidic ingredients in a recipe don't produce enough carbon monoxide from the baking soda, that is when baking powder is needed as well. Having baking powder and baking soda in a recipe gives it the right amount of lift to receive the proper texture and density. Using baking powder and baking soda. If you plan on baking regularly, whether you're an expert or beginner in baking, it is best to have both baking powder and baking soda in your pantry. There are many recipes that will call for baking powder and baking soda. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe.